As our society continues to struggle with the issue of sexual harassment and assault, the U.S. Armed Forces show they're also not immune to these crimes. As William Brangham now reports, a new study released by the Department of Defense today shows a troubling rise in assaults.
That's right, Amna. The study from the Pentagon today says that reports of sexual assault went up by 13% last year, but it indicated the problem could still be far worse. This rise, of course, comes after numerous efforts by the different military branches to stem these kinds of attacks. The study, which was based on the Pentagon's most recent anonymous survey, indicated that more than 20,000 service members, mostly female, experienced some kind of sexual assault last year. The greatest reported increase were assaults against female service members aged 17 to 24, and they were most often attacked by similarly ranked service members. Among the branches, the Marine Corps saw the biggest increase with a 23% rise. And overall, only a third of the alleged victims filed a formal report. Joining me now is Democratic Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois. She is a former lieutenant colonel in the Army, and she sits on the Senate Armed Services Committee. Senator Duckworth, thank you very much for being here. I wonder if you could just give me your initial reaction when you saw these numbers.
Well, my initial reaction is that they show both a success and a failure on the part of the military leadership. I think that the numbers reflect the training that the military has been increasing so that more troops can identify what actually is sexual assault. So I think that the responses to the survey, that increase, that 5,000 increase, actually shows that the troops better understand what is sexual assault. So that's a success on the military side, that their educational program is working. What really bothers me, though, is that the percentage who actually reported these sexual assaults to their leadership, to the mechanisms that the military has put into place, remains at a very low 30%. And that shows that there is still a distrust within the ranks of the military establishment for reporting, and there's a sense perhaps that maybe they don't trust that they'll get justice, they don't trust that they won't be retaliated against. Whatever it is, there's still a problem. So the education piece, I think, is reflected in the increase in numbers, showing that, hey, more people understand what sexual assault is, but still a same low percentage are actually reporting it and trying to seek justice, and that's a problem.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. If a victim of a sexual assault in the armed services feels that they are not going to get justice, or as you say, they're going to get retaliated against, how do we strengthen that system so that people who are legitimate victims of crimes feel like they will get justice and then actually get justice?
Well, this is where, as a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee and someone who's worked on this issue for a long time, I wonder if it's time for us to really take control. The military leaders have been saying time and time again, give us more time, we're going to deal with this. We've put into place more systems, more ways for the victims of sexual assault to be able to report, that we're going to change the culture. I think they've partially been successful with changing the culture, and that they have been successful at educating people so that they know what sexual assault is, especially among our younger troops, but they have not been successful in terms of the establishment. And perhaps it is time to fully remove the investigation, the criminal justice part out from under the command of the military leadership in that command structure when it comes to sexual crimes.
I know that's been a subject of great debate amongst the service members, and other members of the Senate and the House have said, we can't simply have a victim reporting to her direct supervisor because that person is often potentially a witness to or part of the culture in which that crime occurred. But there's great resistance on the military's part to taking the direct leaders out of that process.
Right, because there are direct, and look, I was a military commander. I want control of my unit, and I want the ability to really instill discipline. The problem is the military has put into place many mechanisms, including allowing victims to report through a separate chain, not necessarily their own chain of command. But there's still a problem here, because even though more victims recognize that they were victims of sexual assault in these increase in numbers, not a percentage of those who actually use the system, the new system that's in place, has not increased. So we've got to fix that.
More broadly, I'm curious what your sense is. Do you think that this is this increased problem of sexual assault, is this a military problem or is this a civilian problem? Because as we were just reporting, a large number of the victims and the perpetrators are very young people. They're coming right out of their homes and cities and lives and are only in the services for a year or two, maybe just enlisted. So is this a civilian issue or is this a military issue?
I think this is a combination of cultural issue. And remember, what I want to make clear is that I don't know that the number of sexual assaults in the military has increased. What this report says is that more people who were asked, were you victims of an assault, reported that they were. And I think this is more an educational piece where more of them understand what sexual assault is, who maybe 2 or 3 years ago would have said, oh, I was drunk and I had sex with someone that I didn't want to have sex with, but I passed out. Now, 2 or 3 years later, they understand, no, that was sexual assault. You did not give consent. So I don't know that the number of that the increase has been as a result of more sexual assaults in the military. I think it's more that more people understand and are acknowledging that they were victims. However, the number who reported through the chain of command that this is a problem still remains very low. So this report shows me that there is a lack of confidence in the system for reporting and prosecuting these crimes. This is important because what it shows is there's also a systemic issue and a cultural issue in our nation with these young people, William, as you're mentioning, that they're coming in. And I think that if you had the same kind of education system in college campuses, for example, you would probably see a larger number of people say, hey, I was a sexual assault victim myself, who maybe right now are college freshmen and who would not have recognized the situation they were in.
I wonder, Senator, how much you think if there were more and more women in senior leadership roles in the different branches, would that help address this?
Oh, very much so. And I think you're seeing some of those changes happening now with more women in command positions, especially as women enter into combat fields across the military. You're going to see a real better understanding and a better handling of this issue. And I think that, and this is from my own experience, when I was a company commander, I was the only female commissioned officer in my battalion for a long time, for example, and I actually had young women from other units come to me who were not in my unit who said, ma'am, I want to report something to you. You're the only female officer that I know, so I'm going to come to you because I didn't trust to report or ask for help through my own chain of command. So more women in leadership across the military will help this situation.
All right, Senator Tammy Duckworth, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.